In this video, I'm going to give you a historical overview of the first 5 years of Axe Decentralized Real Estate, how God has moved to help us every single step along the way, even when we've made major mistakes and hit major setbacks as a company. The reason I want to give you this history is twofold. Number one, there's a lot of new families and friends who are joining us at Axe School, and it's important for you to understand the history of our company and the history of what we've gone through to build Axe to what it is today. The second reason that we want to give you this history is to give you some encouragement, because a lot of the problems and the setbacks that we faced as a company are similar to the problems and the setbacks that you are going to face when you create your own legacy estate community, whether it's you and your spouse, or you, your spouse and your kids, or you want to create a community of 50 people or 500 people. A lot of the mistakes that we've gone through allow us to now give you those same principles so that you can avoid the same mistakes that we've made along the way. So with that being the case, let's start at the very, very beginning of Axe Decentralized Real Estate in February 2021, when the idea was formed. See, at the time, my wife and I had already gone down the rabbit hole. We looked into the deep nature of Satanism, the deep nature of the evils of the state, of our society, the evils that were being pushed onto families to destroy families within by making men weak and making women invert their values. So at this time, when our daughter was born, we'd already had an understanding of the importance of being fully independent, but we had thought that living in a normal suburban neighborhood would be enough. And when our daughter was born, the winter storm that occurred on the very day that she was born exposed just how reliant we were on the system that we claimed to fully despise and hate and want to get away from. When that winter storm happened, we had no food, no water, no heat, no electricity, and we were left completely unprepared, despite living in a gated community by the water in the reddest county in the state of Texas. I'll never forget being there that night and thinking to myself how much I felt like a failure, how silly I felt, how stupid I honestly felt, because of the fact that I knew how important it was to prepare my family and how little I'd actually done to prepare my family in that way. And the big reason for it was because I didn't grow up a farmer. My father was a doctor. He worked incredibly hard. He sent me to private school. I cannot at all fault that man for the efforts that he put in as a father and as the leader of my household, but he simply did not grow up knowing some of the skills that are necessary. Thus, he could not pass those skills on to me when I was a child. So this winter storm really exposed what it meant to provide and protect as a father and the large gap in my skill set that I'd had. And that was what would set us off to create Axe Decentralized Real Estate. Because when we fast forward a little bit after that event, in March 2021, we'd had a cryptocurrency account that had grown and allowed us to make a choice. We could either use the funds that had grown from about $15,000 all the way to more than $150,000 to start our own homestead or buy our own house, or we could go all in on education. We ended up choosing our education, and it was this education that formed the basis for Axe Decentralized Real Estate, but it was because none of the options available in the market would be good enough for what we wanted to do. See, we'd had that money stored in a cryptocurrency account that we could use as the down payment, but no matter whether we went to an agri-hood or we went to a suburban neighborhood or we went to go buy land on land.com or go buy a ranch, none of the options available met our needs, because even if we did buy the land, or even if we did buy a homestead with the down payment that we had available, there was nobody to actually work the ranch. There was no way that I was going to cross the gap of all of the skills that were necessary to do all the things that I want to do. And if you're wondering, well, what is it that you wanted to do? It was really this. I'd sat down and I'd done a calculation of the caloric intake necessary for a growing family. And when I did that, I realized that a growing family, even if it was a family of 4, would need about 800 pounds of meat every single year at the very minimum in order to thrive. Realistically, it would have to be even more than that. And so every single option that we looked at, we realized really quickly, there's no way that with this land or with this homestead, we'll be able to grow that 800 pounds of food every single year, at least 800 pounds of meat every single year to hit the goals that we wanted to hit. So we thought to ourselves, there has to be some type of way. And so we made the decision to start Axe after talking to a bunch of other individuals and realizing other people felt the same way too. And so we used that down payment to invest in our education and learn about agriculture, investment funds, land development, construction, marketing, sales, and overall running a company itself. I'd already had some education on what it would mean to run a business, but what I realized was in studying each of those domains, there were answers that existed within each domain. There was just nobody who was making those domains talk. So nobody was coming from the agricultural world to talk to the land development world, to talk to the world of sales and marketing, and talk to the world of designing for human psychology. So that was the major influence that allowed us to start Axe Decentralized Real Estate. So when we made that decision in 2022, we ended up taking about a year just to sit there, learn, and study and read. And I call this the underground. So it was about 2 years just learning about agriculture, land development, investments, legal structures. And we'd had an Instagram account that is the same as what you see now, the Axe Decentralized Real Estate account. But at the time, we just used it to interview families. So we took about 2 years or so from 2021 through 2022, all the way to 2023, just interviewing families one-on-one through Zoom calls. And we actually carry this tradition all the way to today. When you buy an Axe land stake reservation, one of the first things that's going to happen is you're going to have a one-on-one call with me. And on the call, we're going to talk about your vision, as well as the obstacles that you feel stand in the way of that vision. It was this process of interviewing over 300 families one-on-one before even advertising the first property that allowed us to build Axe as uniquely and as differently as it is now. So if you look at other real estate, most people, they come from a real estate background or an investment funds background, and they're just thinking about the numbers. They don't care about the people whatsoever. But for us, it was very important for us to interview families one-on-one, over 300 families one-on-one. And now, 5 years later, it's been over 1,000 families one-on-one to understand the fundamental problems in moving off grid. And it was from that process that we were able to squeeze out the fundamental issues that were getting in the way of people. And that is how we created the Axe 7-step bridge, the plan where you create a plan, you get financing, you buy land, you start your franchise, you sell food, you create a business plan, and you build your homes. All of that structure came from this time spent in the underground working my regular, not day job. I had my own marketing company at the time, but working my regular day job and preparing Axe in the background by interviewing families one-on-one. Now, we tried to play it safe by working on our main business while keeping Axe as a side hustle, but nothing worked. Every single time we would go present Axe to investors, present Axe to groups of people, we would get the following remarks. Number one, people loved the idea, but nobody was interested in actually investing in it. And that deep dive into the world of investment funds and capital raising really allowed me to understand why it is that we don't have a world filled with more independent behaviors and more independent actors. And the answer is simply money and greed. Very often, when you're working with investors, they're concerned with their exit, their return. They want consistency. They do not want to take on risk. So we consistently found that people would say, wow, this is an amazing idea. I want to live there, but I don't want to invest in anything like that. And that meant that after, I remember it was at least, had to be at least 150 of these different interviews. I remember eventually realizing, my goodness, this is never going to happen if we try to go to the conventional route. And that's when we realized we had to really double down and go all in on the crowdfunding model for Axe rather than going with standard investors, because it would mean either compromising our values far too much, or it would mean having to kowtow and give so much away to investors and bend the knee to them so much that the project would ultimately lose its heart. Now, I remember that this time period, early 2023, this was a time period where we'd already been leaning on the Lord consistently in order to make it from one step to the next step to the next step. And he'd really set things out where we learned to trust him and go with our gut sense again and again and again for bigger and bigger bets. But up to this point, and this is a theme you're going to notice throughout this whole discussion, up to this point, at this moment, this was the biggest bet of our lives, because we had spent the last few years from 2020 all the way till 2023, that January of 2023, building up our marketing company to a place where it was making a substantial amount. But a series of decisions made it where we had to make a choice. We either continued with the marketing company or we went all in on Axe when Axe was a completely unproven idea. And this is something that you're going to have to face in your life as well. When you're deciding to move to an Axe property, if you have a career or maybe you have a business, you're going to have to go through that fear of what am I going to do next? Where am I going to go? And that's where leaning on the Lord is the most important. If we didn't lean on him and if we didn't have that faith, we would not be able to go all in on Axe the way we needed to so that Axe could exist the way that it does today. So now it was summer 2023, and I remember that this was the summer where we first went viral. We'd spent a month's worth of salary on a credit card to get Top Spot as a sponsor at a powerful event. It was David Avocado Wolf's live event here in Texas. But at the time, to spend that money to go all in on that opportunity was horrifying. That was basically all the money that we'd had for an entire month put onto a credit card with no guarantee that it would actually pay off. We had no idea that things would blow up the way they did on Instagram. And I really do attribute it to this time period. If you want to know, at that time, it was about the price of a parcel reservation, a little bit more to go make this decision. And I remember just the rush that we'd felt when we were like, okay, like we're going to do this, this is pretty scary. And we'd actually ended up doing it. So later in October 2023, we acquired Little G Ranch. Little G is our first property ever. It was 492 acres of land that we would subdivide into 40 10-acre parcels. And the funny thing about it is, number one, we were actually too scared to start off with Little G Ranch. We thought Little G was too big of a property. And so the first property that we made available was something called 10 Ponds Ranch. And 10 Ponds Ranch was only about 230 acres and about half the price of Little G. We'd started off with 10 Ponds and started marketing it, but at the time, we had an idea where we would market the property first, then have the crowdfunding. But when we did that, we found that a random hidden player just came in and put a cash offer in on that first version, 10 Ponds Ranch, one day before we had the property visit. I remember freaking out and literally weeping on the side of a road because I felt so embarrassed. I thought that this was the first time that we'd put word out there about Axe. We were brand new. We'd gone viral. I think we'd gotten 400,000 views on that video. And we're not even into the first property visit yet. And we've already hit a failure. That's when the spirit had kind of struck me and was like, hey, actually, not all is lost. I was about to turn, I was literally driving back home. Like I had to drive like an hour and a half back home because I thought we'd completely lost this property. And that's when it was like, no, actually turn around and reconsider that other property, Little G Ranch. If I had not had that moment there on the side of the road, Axe would not exist as it currently exists. So remember picking myself up, stopping the weeping and going over to Little G and seeing my eyes on it for the first time. And where I had just a few minutes before been crying tears of sadness and anger and frustration and doubt, I was now crying tears of joy because I saw the property and I knew at that moment that we were going to acquire Little G Ranch. But little did I know it wouldn't be without a fight. And that theme continues on all the way to this day. None of the properties we acquire come without a fight. And that's for us on the big end, but it's the same thing for you on the smaller end. If you're getting 5 acres or 10 acres, I am telling you right now that there is the most spiritual warfare over land, more than almost anything else that you will experience in your life. First off, when we talk about warfare, all warfare is waged over the territory of something. It's to occupy territory. And so when we're talking about land, that is the most important territory of all, because that's the point of a war. It's to go and take over the land itself. From the very beginning, Satan and the other fallen angels have always been jealous of us and envious of us because of the fact that we have dominion over land. That's why the snake entered the garden, to try to trick us, to let us give up our land. And that same theme still moves forward all the way to when we were acquiring Little G. I remember having to sit there and create entire Google spreadsheet lists of lenders that would help out as private money lenders so that we could acquire the property. And just sitting there, one call after another, getting rejected again and again and again and again and again. I know how many people were on the list. There was 208 names on that list. And out of 208 different places that we'd call, only one was actually able to help us out. There was one other individual that we'd considered would be able to get the deal done. That individual, he even shaken our hand, gone out, visited the property, told us they would get the deal done, and straight up, weeks before the close of that land, that was supposed to be in September, they just completely ghosted us. So I remember having to continue to make those calls with everything down to the wire so that we could acquire Little G. Ultimately, it was through a miracle of God that we were able to make the right connection with the right phone call, and we were able to acquire Little G Ranch with 104% financing on the loan to value. So what does that mean? When you are acquiring a property, whether it's a large property or it's a small property, there's going to be something called the loan to value or the loan to cost. That is how much a lender is willing to loan you in proportion to the cost of the property that you have there. Now, usually when it comes to acquiring large land, you will not get a loan to value of greater than about 60%. That means that, let's say a property is $10 million, they will not loan you more than $6 million. That whatever is left over, you have to come up with on your own. So in the case of acquiring Little G Ranch, by the grace of God, we were able to make the right connection who simply happened to have bought a farm himself maybe a couple of months before that and had known about the value of farming, the value of acquiring land, that he was able to help us out, end up getting 104% financing to acquire Little G Ranch. Now, when we say 104%, what's the extra 4%? Well, what we did was we wrapped into that loan the interest that I would have to pay throughout the next 6 months to pay off the property. And the idea was that if we could pay off the whole property in 6 months or less, then we wouldn't have to pay interest. It would simply be baked into everything that we're selling off. The catch with that, however, was that when we had to make sales at the time, we would not receive a single dollar from any one of those sales. So every time we made a sale for the first 20 ranches at Little G Ranch, we did not make a single dollar from any one of those sales. And so the only thing that allowed us to scrape on by was the fact that we had the parcel reservations, and that's what allowed us to just be able to make it as we made those sales. That paid for legal fees, that paid for the work that had to be done, the surveys that had to be done, all of the different things that had to go into it. February 2024, the great collapse of Tennessee and Florida. So, as I'd mentioned, we'd gone viral in the summer of 2023. And when it came to parcel reservations, we actually had enough parcel reservations to not only oversubscribe a property in Tennessee, but actually oversubscribe 2 properties in Tennessee. At the time, we also had an influx of people who were interested in Florida. So we wanted to be bold. We wanted to do something different. Things were going well to get Little G up and running. So we put under contract Creo Ranch over in Middle Tennessee. Then there was going to be another property in Middle Tennessee called Apron. And then we also placed Panoplia under contract. But when we were in the middle of getting ready for that property, after already putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the surveys and the paperwork and the environmental studies that were necessary to get to move forward with those projects, we struggled to get the funding that was necessary to move forward with the property. And once again, this is the consistent theme of what happens. If you guys want to know what causes the most delays with everything that we're doing, it is funding. It is almost always the funding. Funding is what wins and loses the war on any new property acquisitions. Whenever we have delays, whenever things are taking longer than we'd like, whenever we can't move forward with new acquisitions, it is always down to getting the actual funding. Of course, getting the funding comes down to even deeper spiritual matters. But when we're talking about this world, the 3D world, it is always funding. So what caused the great collapse of Tennessee and Florida, which was honestly my worst nightmare, it was the probably worst time of my life, really came down to contacting lender after lender after lender and finding that none of them were big enough to actually move forward with the deals that we had at that time. So if we added it up, there was Florida, which was about $12.75 million. Then there was the first Creo, which was going to be about another $6.5 million. And the second Creo was about $3.5 million. So if you add it all up, it was more than about $23 million worth of funding that was necessary to get the whole deal done. And simply people could not fund anything that was that size, especially not for a project as new and as different as ours was. Little G was not fully paid off yet. It was a brand new speculative idea. So to get that $25 million of funding, we went to call after call after call. Now, at the very end, we'd met a gentleman who was a Christian influencer with over about 65,000 followers. He was a big fan of Acts, and he said, "Hey, I actually have a contact, a mentor who could help us out with funding, and I would love to be there to help you guys out. I'll get a little kickback from it, not that big of a deal, but you got to meet my mentor." We went and we met his mentor. We talked to him multiple times on phone calls, on Zoom calls, and he'd introduced us to his fund manager who could help us out with the $25 million that we needed for funding at the time. So we'd had multiple calls with him. We'd met with him. He'd talked to the lawyers, all these different pieces, got everything dotted. And they'd presented a plan where essentially if we placed in about $450,000 of funding, we would be able to get the financing necessary to close up on these properties. And coming off of the success of Little G, where we'd gotten 104% financing, the professionalism, the paperwork, the number of meetings, the different ways that we'd gone through to be able to move forward with that project made us seem like, man, we're going to be able to get this done. It truly felt like a godsend. And so we'd had all the properties, both Tennessee properties and the Florida property, set to close on the same day, on my birthday. And I'll never forget the awful feeling of kind of thinking, yeah, these guys, it might be a little bit too good to be true, and it actually being too good to be true. At the time, we'd put in $450,000 that was immediately lost. It was just a complete and total scam. And I remember feeling incredibly stupid because I'd looked up the names of the individuals that were to help us out. And I remember Googling them and seeing their names in several different lawsuits, but not just paying the money to go and read through the lawsuits. I kind of just ignored them. I thought, oh, well, I guess it's just, a stupid, frivolous thing. And if I would have just paid paid to go past the paywall, I would have seen that it was a scheme that would target specifically agricultural projects. One of them called Lucky Lake, that used the same exact business model to try to scam them, the same exact way to try to lure them in. I remember the very next day, after things had fallen through on, again, not just one, not just two, but 3 different properties, calling one by one each one of the individual angels and then all the families who were waiting to get started with the projects and explaining to them exactly what had happened and exactly how we had failed. My wife was pregnant at the time, and it led to a big rift within the company. About 4 or 5, I think 5 different employees had quit on that very day. And I'd never felt lower in my life. I mean, here we are, we've gone mega viral the summer before that. And the constant reframe, the constant thing that I deal with all the time is people saying, is it too good to be true? It must be a scam. Is it too good to be true? This can't be real. It's too good to be true. This can't we do this? We can't do this. And just having the pressure that I felt on my back all the time to get the job done, to get the first examples for Axe. We had Little G already up and running. People were still skeptical, and having everything collapse through on that, it was indescribable. The pain, the anger, the frustration, the embarrassment, the humiliation. But I remember we owned it. We didn't hide anything. We called people one-on-one. And that was one of the first times that I saw the strength of the Axe community. Pretty much nobody actually fell out from the Florida property, and almost none of the families, I think except for like one family, dropped out from Tennessee at the time. They'd not quit on me. I thought there was no way that people weren't going to quit. Like, I mean, my own team members were going to quit, but that wasn't the case at all. So what ended up happening was we couldn't move forward on those 2 Tennessee properties simply because the sellers, they wanted to move on. They just wanted to get their cash from other sources, just other buyers that were waiting in the wings. So that was just a complete loss on those earnest money deposits and all the refunds that we had to do for those families. But we kept with it in Florida. And in May 2024, we'd continued selling properties over for Little G Ranch, and that allowed us to pay off the loan for Little G, proving that the business model was viable and that we could do it. And for the first time, we could actually start making money as a company. Then in the summer of 2024, we had the first franchises get up and running. Now, this wasn't going to come with ease as well. So we had the Lord helping us out so that we could fully pay off Little G just a little bit after dealing with the horrible collapse over in Tennessee and Florida. But now we have the first franchises getting paid for. And almost within weeks of the first franchises getting up and running, we realized that the operations specialist that we had on it was just not going to be the right guy for the job. He had a lot of book knowledge, but not enough physical knowledge to get the job done. So we had to spend, we spent a lot of money, over $300,000, making mistakes. We probably switched teams over 3 times over. We started off first with that initial team that we'd selected from other ranches, big name ranches, like the Biggest Little Farm, and from other noteworthy ranches like White Oak Pastures, to then trying a team of different military members. So it was ex-Marines that would come out. Then we hired local farmers and ranchers to try helping us out, and still it was a failure. So it was again and again and again, paying for personnel, paying for salaries, paying for equipment, trying out equipment, and just none of it working whatsoever. I remember, for example, the debacle with chicken coops. We went through like 8 different styles of chicken coops. One time, a hurricane came in and blew one of the chicken coops that cost more than $10,000 into a tree. Like literally, we asked, where's the chicken coop? It was here last week, and you saw it mangled in a mess, completely destroyed, and in the branches of a tree. Then to really add insult to injury, we thought, okay, let's bring in the big guns. Let's bring in Joel Salatin himself, the lunatic farmer, to help us out in a deal that was more than 6 figures. It was 6 figures to have a licensing opportunity, and then another about $25,000 to come have him personally consult with me on the ranch, only to have Joel Salatin come out there and basically do nothing but say, look, dude, this is you're in way over your head. You should just stick to real estate. Forget about ranching. This is just going to be way too difficult. You're trying to squeeze what took me 60 years into just 2 years, and it's just never going to happen. And I would say this was between the collapse of Tennessee and the collapse of Florida, that was probably the closest I'd really ever gotten to quitting, except for there was one other time, and that was in 2020, late 2025, early 2026. That was even harder. Now, we kept pressing, and in October 2024, we acquired Panoplia Ranch with the help of 12 families that came together to buy 16 parcels of land. And then this was also the time period that we'd hired Adam and we'd hired Justin for the Ranch Hand League and to start the ranching operations. The lesson here during this part of the process was the importance of having the right people around you. It was because we had the right people around us that we were able to acquire Panoply Ranch. These were the same families that could have easily quit on us when we'd had the collapse in February 2024. But when you have the right personalities together, you have people who stick with you. And those families stuck with us to allow us to acquire and get started with Panoply Ranch. But also on the farming side of things, yeah, we'd spent a lot of money, but the Lord always made sure that there was just enough for us to be able to continue on with operations. And then we were able to have Justin and have Adam and have the Ranch Hand League get started and move to the place that we really needed to. At that time, where we were at, I'll never forget, we'd had Colt, our third son, our third born son, that very same week that we'd had to fire the ranch managers that would have been there. And therefore, we'd inherited this farm where we had absolutely no clue what we were going to do. And that was literally the very exact same time that we met Adam. So it was this consistent theme of out with the old, in with the new that we found again and again and again. So like when we'd had the great collapse of Tennessee and Florida, sure, it was out with a few of the team members that were mentally weak, but came in new team members that were much stronger and much better. In the summer of 2024, it was out with the old, with the ranchers that just weren't going to be the right fit, but then in with the talent that was necessary to make something last a long time. So this brought us to January 2025. Now the franchises are operational. Now Panoplia is operational. And now, after a year of preparation, Wanted Raw Foods launches, but it launched slowly. We'd expected it to be based on raw milk and that we would be able to get started with sales over at Farmers Market incredibly fast. But it turned out that, number one, it was just a lot of logistical difficulty to get the raw milk operations up and running. And number two, it was shipping that really held things back more than we ever had expected. But because we found the right people, because the Lord led the right people to us, we were able to get help with having the right logistics for the shipping, having the right packaging, having the right scheduling, having the right formatting for all of the containers and refrigerators necessary, having the right setups so that we could have our own freezers, so that over the course of time, Wanted Raw Foods launched slowly, but then began to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So then in February 2025, we began plans on the new Creo Ranch by getting it under contract. This is 922 acres of land, half of which was on market, half of which was off market. And I'd already known that if the first Creo had fallen through, that would be because there would be an even better option. And I remember through the worst of times telling myself that again and again and again and again and again, because it's all that I really had to cling to help me push through the hardest of times. But when we placed the new Creo Ranch under contract, that was a confirmation of that faith. That was a confirmation of sticking through it and knowing that there would be something better around the corner was in fact the reality. And the new Creo Ranch really is the case with that. It was in a better location. It's better land. It's larger land. It's a better price. And it's overall more beautiful and more lush and more varied and more distinct than the original Creo Ranch. I remember with the original spending a good amount of money to do the surveying and do the environmental studies and being worried about the floodplains, looking at some elements of the property that were hidden, elements of the property that required a lot of deforestation, things like that. But the new Creo simply had everything that we were looking for and more. So that was exciting. But as is usual, when you have an up, there might be a down, because by May 2025, the new Say No to Creo Ranch protests began. The local neighbors started protesting our property visits, wearing local Jezebel t-shirts when I explained that every one of the behaviors and actions modeled the same behaviors that you find by the spirit of Jezebel in 1 Kings 18 and 19. So these protesters have really tried harassing me, tried writing disparaging comments about me for the last year and a half, just writing whatever they want, slandering us, lying about us. And it was very difficult to just remain silent and to remain cool and not stoop down to their position through all the different claims, including going and trying to find bikini photos of my wife when she was a 16 and 17-year-old and posting those online, trying to write commentary in there, asking others to go in and harass me in my actual location. So when I would eat at local restaurants, they would post TJ's eating at this restaurant and try to get others to come in and harass me, writing things in like this S talking Negro, writing things in to then say, no, we have not, of course he's going to try to say that we're racist. It's because he's black, which that's kind of ironic. I'm going to say they're racist because I'm black, when really it's that there's a history of the KKK going on. And I'll never forget going out there to go meet them directly. First off, talking to a group of 50 of them with my wife and with the team and with our children, and them screaming at us rather than actually being able to just listen to us and talk to us directly. But then when you talk to them one by one, they would realize and say, hey, we actually don't believe in this stuff. It's just, it's part of what we do to fit in around here with these other neighbors. Others coming in and revealing that it was about Freemasonry. It was about the KKK. They were upset because we'd barred secret society members from entering our Axe properties. So whether you're a Freemason, a Shriner, or a member of the KKK, you cannot buy with us at Axe Decentralized Real Estate. And being offered by the local Freemasons over there in Tennessee that all of our problems would go away if I would join them at the lodge. These disparaging comments, these protests have continued and probably lost us millions of dollars, but we continued forward in our faith. And I would say that this was the beginning of the next hardest moment that I'd felt in trying to get this stuff up and running, which was just the persecution, the lies, the prejudice, the constant slander, the constant libel that would occur again and again and again. And I would say that this was the beginning of a new version of me and leadership, in the sense of it really forced me to remain, to really throw out my ego, right? Now, people talk about like, oh, be humble, you have to have humility. And to be honest, most of the time when I hear people say that, I kind of think they're lying. But in this moment, because of having people just sit there and just bully and lie and slander, you have to get to a point where you literally you literally throw your own self-image out the window and you stop caring entirely about what other people have to say about you. So it's not some humbleness or humility that you have to develop because you're so amazing, but because the beatdown, the verbal, psychological, and spiritual beatdown that happens is so intense. It's every single day, the same questions, the same accusations, the same lies, the same slander on repeat to such a degree that you have to go with the Lord, or else it will consume you. It can be an all-consuming fire of anger and hatred, and that is exactly what demons want. So you have to make a very hard choice. You could either forgive and let go and recognize and see what happens from the perspective of what the Lord sees it as, and understand its place and its role in it, that it's just a role to get you to go closer to the Lord, or you can collapse under that pressure. And I don't even want to take credit for not collapsing under pressure. Like, it still goes to the Lord. It was only by his grace and by his faith that we were able to make it through the start of these protests. I mean, the start of these protests led to having to have major considerations within the value of the company with different employees, and having to say goodbye to different people that we were going to work with on the team. Really having to go through and have tests within the faith of my marriage, and having to understand that my wife was going through even worse things than I was going through, because she had to listen to and hear all these different terrible accusations and go through all this while oh so pregnant and while oh so going through this. In fact, this is another consistent theme of what would occur with the history of Acts. A lot of the worst times, a lot of the worst things that we'd ever faced happened in the middle of pregnancy. So for every bad thing that I might have faced, my wife faced things that were even more difficult and even harder. And she's been an inspiration in the sense of, she's been able to make it through those things and stick by my side the whole entire time, even during times where I might lose some faith. Seeing that my wife has stuck with me throughout all these different things, I mean, she's consistently remained, in my eyes, I have to thank the Lord again. It's another example of just how little I've actually done this entire time, and how little any of us really do, and how much it is by the grace of the Lord that anything actually gets done. So in June 2025, we have the acquisition of Victorian Meat Farmstead Company. This entire year, really 2025, all the way through the first half of 2026, has been spent fine-tuning the Axe business model. And rather than focusing on outward growth on Instagram, we started focusing on making connections to grow the Ranch and League, grow Wanted Foods, and grow Axe Homes. And acquiring Victorian Meat Farmstead Company was essential to that. When we acquired Victorian Meat Farmstead, that meant we acquired their equipment, we acquired the recipes, their customer list, added that to Wanted Raw Foods, and most importantly, it freed up the time of Adam. By Adam having more free time, that meant that he could help us out with the company as we grow the Ranch Hand League and Wanted and everything at Axe. Then in February 2026, we had the acquisition of Vincent Farms, so that now with that acquisition, we now own and are one of the largest raw milk producers in the state of Texas, certainly in East Texas, no question about that, soon poised to become the biggest soon enough. And even this, once again, came down to God helping us out. It was a fantastic opportunity. There was a confluence of different pieces of capital coming together, as well as opportunity coming together, and having great conversations with Justin and Stephanie so that we could make this acquisition and turn something that was just an idea, the idea of wanting to have raw milk, into a reality and striking when it was necessary. I think that a lot of people would sit there hesitating and hemming and hawing. And for almost a year and a half, we'd been wanting and working towards the acquisition, but we tried various normal means to get the job done. But another theme that we find is often the normal route doesn't work with these big special acquisitions. So for you on your end, if you're looking to make an acquisition, if you're trying to go things the normal route, it might not work out for you, because for whatever reason in this spiritual war, I have noticed that going the normal route does not work. You have to go through a route that requires radical faith, and the Vincent Farms acquisition required radical faith. And when we had that radical faith, all of a sudden the money necessary to initiate the acquisition came in, and we were able to move forward with that part of the process. So here we are now in May 2026, and I'm happy to report that Axe Homes has finally broken ground. So 5 years after coming up with the idea for Axe, and 5 years after starting out a company that's barely on social media, we've now grown to over 30 employees. We sold out of land in Texas, and we've broken ground on the first homes. But that wasn't without its own set of mistakes, where it took about $300,000 to grow the Ranch Hand League. It was another similar amount to get Axe Homes up and running. We'd made mistakes in hiring individuals to help us build up the company that did not have the right skill set. We'd invested tens of thousands of dollars to get the first architectural plans up and running, and they weren't architectural plans that would be feasible for what we needed to do and really grow and show people the designs that they ultimately needed. We'd set out and gotten the first set of crews, but then we found that that set of crews was not going to be the right set of construction crews. And along the way, we made another acquisition of another construction company, added that into our repertoire, and from there started gaining momentum by hiring the right person, in this case, Johanna, to help us out because of her experience in helping others with home design and home selections, and in helping out with operations. So if we look at this entire timeline, when Axe was formed, the vision was created. We lived underground. We walked by faith. We started going viral. We acquired Little G. We had the collapse of Tennessee and Florida. We got Little G paid off. We had the first franchises, acquired Panoplia, launched Wanted Raw Foods, started the new Creole Ranch, dealt with protesters, dealt with the KKK, acquired Victorian Meat Farmstead Company, acquired Vincent Farms, and broken ground with Axe Homes. The biggest themes that I would say along the way are as follows. So if you made it all the way to the end, then congratulations, because these are the most important points. The first thing that I have to say is to throw out the spreadsheets. If you think that the journey forward is going to be a straightforward journey, you've got a completely different thing coming for you. And that's whether you're building your own community or you're starting your legacy estate. If you think that your plan that fits on a little spreadsheet is going to be the thing that you're going to actually translate into reality, it's just not going to work out that easy. You read about it in the Bible that the Lord does all things to glorify himself and to glorify his name, and that he will not allow people to take credit for the success. And it is not a joke. He will not let you take credit for the success vis-a-vis some type of straightforward plan that you could be like, I did this because I'm so smart or I'm so hardworking. The fact of the matter is, you're going to have all of your intelligence and all of your skills tested more than you could ever imagine. But even then, with everything that you can put into it, it still is going to require him and his presence for you to get things done. There's going to be weather effects. I remember, for example, to acquire Panoplia, we literally had a act of God that allowed us to extend contracts to give us another month so that we could move forward with Panoplia Ranch. We'd had multiple examples of what if you were secular, you'd be like, oh, you just got lucky. And that's just not the mindset. You have to create luck by being blessed. And that comes from actually listening to and observing the principles of the Lord. The next big thing I would say that I've noticed in building Acts is that it's all about the people. The biggest thing that will create your success is the people that you have around you. It's going to be people problems and people emotions and people dynamics that are going to carry you through. If you're surrounded by the wrong people, you are going to be dead in the water. However, if you are surrounded by the right people, and you have the right culture, and you have the right peers, and you have the right skill sets put together by having those people, then you can basically get anything done. What we find consistently is that things got delayed. It seems like nothing's happening whatsoever. Then we have the right people in at the right time, and things move massively. So, for example, for Axe Homes, there was like a year of almost no progress being made. We would try. And then as soon as we'd had Johanna come on board, in under 1 month, she was able to do more than we had done in the year before that. Same thing with the Ranch Hand League. You could sit there stalling, not have the right thing. But when you have the right person, if you have the favor of God, boom, that's when you all of a sudden start having increases. We also know this with sales. So we will have a slump where there's nothing, and then a spike. All of a sudden, a ton of sales, a ton of people at the same time, which takes me one step a little bit deeper. So you have to rely on the Lord, and ultimately the Lord's going to lead you to the right people who have the right skill sets or have the right money and the right capital to allow you to move forward. But that will only happen when you do everything possible, every single thing possible to get your mind, your heart, and your soul right in your relationship with Him. Every single time that we have made progress, it has come more as a result of resting and pulling ourselves back, going on vacation, or going and getting really good sleep and getting really good rest and just letting go of things more than it has ever come from working harder and striving and trying to do more and put things on the spreadsheet and get things right and use AI and do the analysis and do the performa. Nothing, not a single example for success has ever resulted from that type of spreadsheet logic. It has only come from us taking a step back and using that relationship and with the Lord to really have better insight and take advantage of opportunities that come from having the right people, which leads me to the final point on all of this. And that is to not listen to people. and specifically to not listen to people who don't know what they're talking about and who have not done the things that you want to do. In the 5 years that it's been building Axe Decentralized Real Estate and building this whole thing to where it is now, which I don't believe is even 1% of what it's going to be in the future, I have received so much bad advice from so many people that seem like so-called experts. It is insane. Almost every single time that we have stagnated as a company, almost every single time we've hit a major plateau or just been stagnant or had delays or not moved forward or not made an acquisition or not done the things that we thought we wanted to do, it has come from believing that some other person has so much more power than us or is so much more expert than us and ignoring our own gut. When we ignore our own gut and do what we're, quote, supposed to do according to the spreadsheet logic, or this is the way things are done, whenever we listen to that type of logic, it has only bitten us in the butt and we've only shot ourselves in the foot. Every single time we've gone all in on working by way of our gut, not intelligence, not heart, not balls, but by way of our gut, and actually listen to the gut and listen to the Holy Spirit and walk by way of faith. Every single time we've done that, not only have we done things, we've done things 10 times faster and just we've gotten immediate results. So I tell you this entire history again so that you understand where we've come from as a company, that we are a startup, that we do make a lot of mistakes. There's been a ton of trial and error. But to not listen to the conventional advice that tells you, oh, well, it should be easier. It's just going to be this linear thing. It is not linear. It was not linear for me. It's not going to be linear for you. Learn to pull the trigger. Learn to just go for it and cap things on the back end. I have made mistakes that for 99% of you are going to be much larger than any of the mistakes that you're going to make along this journey. Okay. Again, millions of dollars worth of mistakes. I've gone through and dealt with terrible, awful slander, very truly evil Satanists, actual witchcraft, actual Freemasons, actual KKK members trying to protest and trying to say stuff and disparage me. None of that compares to the glory of the Lord and the pain of not listening to the Lord and the pain that comes with not listening to your gut. I would much rather, if I'm talking to someone else, you just go with your gut and try something out and fail at it than to suffer the pain and the confusion and the misery that comes with failing when you've also not gone with your gut, or when you've done what you're supposed to do, listening to other people, but having it feel unfulfilling. I remember that life that I used to live when I had the marketing company, and I never want to go back to that again. I never want to be in such misalignment ever again. So ask yourself, how aligned are you? If you feel, and if you know in your mind, your heart, your gut, and your balls, but most importantly, in your gut, if you know that moving forward is in alignment with your values, if you know that it is in alignment with what the Lord wants for you and for your family and for his people, then just pull the trigger. Just pull the trigger and don't look back. At the worst case scenario, it will be a wonderful adventure and you'll learn a lot. And then when it finally does click, you'll be able to take those lessons with you. All of the delays, all the setbacks that I've had here with Axe Decentralized Real Estate, to be honest, I'm pretty happy that they've happened because every single one of those mistakes, every single one of those setbacks makes it so that now, as I move into the future, I'm never making those same mistakes again. I'm never going to those same setbacks again. And I can act with confidence as I move forward. And that is going to be the reason why Axe becomes as big as it's going to become. So apply the same mindset for yourself, apply the same mindset to your family, and apply the same mindset to your legacy estate. God has your back. All you need are the right people to surround you. All you need is to go with your gut, and all you need is to have alignment. If you walk with the Lord in all your ways, he is going to make your path straight, just as he made my path straight and he made Axe's path straight. even through thick and thin, even through protests, even through setbacks, even through major, horrible, seemingly career-ending disasters. So hopefully this is a good video for you. I've not made a video like this before, but I think for some of you, you really needed to hear it because it will give you the confidence to finally pull the trigger and get started with your legacy estate.